Welcome to the No Shame Podcast. I'm John Groders. Once a year, filmmakers and producers, actors and directors from all over the world gather to be encouraged in the Lord and in their craft at the International Christian Visual Media Conference, or ICVM. We spent the week interviewing many of those who attended for our podcast.
Have no shame, no, we are not afraid, no shame of the gospel of his name. It's the power of God by which we are saved. We need not be afraid. No shame.
Welcome to the No Shame Podcast. John Groders here at ICVM, Day 4, and my guest is the famous, the infamous Torry Martin. Torry,
Yes.
what's happening?
Nothing. I'm just kind of playing tiddlywinks with manhole covers, hanging out here, ran into you and thought, well, let's chat.
That's power. Tiddlywinks with manhole covers. Torry is a man of great power and great influence. And really, Torry Martin is kind of, for me, the heart of ICVM. I met you here years ago, and Torry has a way to meet people and make them feel welcome. And you've been making me and Judy feel welcome for so many years here.
Oh, thank you.
And but you're always doing, I never know what you're doing. You're doing all kinds of things. And I'd rather just ask you, what's on your plate these days? What are you working on?
Well, right now I've got a lot of films out. The Ultimate Legacy is on the Hallmark Channel.
Legacy?
Ultimate Legacy with Raquel Welch. That's pretty fun.
Raquel Welch?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
my goodness.
She kept asking me for hair tips. And I'm like, what do you need hair tips for? You run a wig line.
Ultimate Legacy. That's on now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the Hallmark Channel.
And what do you play in
Mountaintop.
that?
I played Oscar the gardener.
And if we're just listening to the podcast, how might we recognize you if we see Ultimate? What would we?
I'll be the only fat person in the cast. The only large.
I thought you'd say handsome, dashing, witty, stunning.
No.
Any of those adjectives?
No, I'm the character, comic relief.
Comic relief.
You know, so
excellent.
That's out. And then Mountaintop, Gary Wheeler's film, that's out right now. Mountaintop, and Heaven Bound is out on PureFlix. Marshall and I wrote The Matchbreaker, which is on Netflix right now. It's a mainstream romantic comedy. It's about the guy that country club mothers hire to break up their daughter's inappropriate relationships. So he is the matchbreaker,
The
not
matchbreaker.
the matchmaker. He's the matchbreaker.
Oh yeah, much
and then,
better.
Heaven Bound and my book of Moose and Men is out. My new book just came out last month called The Call of the Mild. And I started off writing at Adventures In Odyssey with Marshall Younger. And that's where I created the character of Wooten Bassett, and then Marshall and I started writing screenplays together.
Well, other than that, what's keeping you busy? I mean, that's not, 7 movies, 3 books, screenplay writing.
You know, emptying the kitty litter is a daily thing.
You can't let that go for too long. You just can't let it.
Yeah, as much as you would want to.
I've read.
And if cats were really that smart and that clean, like everybody says, they would empty their own kitty litter, don't you
just
think?
flush after themselves. Just
Come
use the
on.
toilet and flush.
Yeah.
Of Moose and Men was the book that I've gotten from you before, and it tells a little of your story. What do you reveal to the world of Moose and Men? At its heart,
That God can use anybody.
right?
That's the basic thing. I was living as a remote hermit hippie in 80 acres in the middle of Bear Valley, Alaska. And that's where I wrote my first episode for Adventures in Odyssey. Didn't have a physical address, no radio, no television, no nothing. I think anybody could become a writer in that situation. There's just nothing else to do. It started off there. And this is probably the last place I would have imagined myself 20 years ago when I was living in that cabin, dreaming that I'd be able to do this. But God will use anybody who's obedient to him and says yes.
Wow, and it really is remote. When Alaska sounds remote, but you were even remote within Alaska.
Yep, we lived in the middle of 80 acres of protected wetlands, so the cabin was actually built on railroad ties to keep from sinking into the wetlands, but it did sink into the wetlands, but each room went in a different direction, like one tipped down to the left, one floor tipped down to the right. We call it cabin vertigo, because if you're upstairs and you had to run to the phone, by the time you got there, you'd be like, whoa. Yeah.
Well, in your life, because I just sort of associate you in so many ways with being a driving force for kingdom work, because that's where I've met you. But when did you first acknowledge the Lord in your life and bend your knee, and how does that play for you?
Gosh, Sean, that's such a good question, because I sometimes wonder if Christians will really understand my answer.
Good.
Because I accepted the Lord earlier. but it was more of a, I believe in Jesus. I believe in God. Who doesn't? That makes me a Christian.
Right.
You say this prayer,
Right.
Lord Jesus, forgive me my sins. I accept the price that you paid for my sins. Thank you for rising again. Thank you for forgiving me. And, all that. But that's not where it ends.
No.
That's where it starts. And being a Christian isn't just saying that prayer. Being a Christian is being a follower of Christ, and that was the difference. So if you ask me, when did you first bend your knee? Well, I've done that several times over the years of my youth, going to youth group, and then as long as I lived at home, one Sunday a month I had to go to church. But it wasn't until I was living in Alaska as an adult that I made a decision to follow and obey, not just believe. And that, therefore, to me, becomes the moment that I became a true Christian. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I personally just love the phrase "the bride of Christ." I've been married to Judy 30 years now. She doesn't just believe I exist. I mean, that's not really worth a whole lot that she believes. She doesn't. It's not about obeying everything I ever say to her. That's not it.
But she should. She's not here right now. Between us,
we know that would benefit her life in many ways. The bride of Christ, I mean, we have to have a relationship. And God doesn't just want us to just believe in Him only and just even obey Him only, or He wouldn't describe us as His children or as His bride. That's something that we're all working into. He wants to know us and be around and lead, and He's willing to pay these prices. So I asked that question awkwardly because it's almost an awkward question, and I don't like falling into the cliches on that either. I just want to hear how other believers who are becoming the bride have worked into that.
Sometimes in my own walk, I feel like, I truly am the bride of Christ, and sometimes I feel like I'm the ex-wife. When you just fall out of fellowship with Him and your relationship becomes cold and distant, and you're still walking in faith, but you feel like the communication is falling apart. Or sometimes you just obediently, or you just disobey and embrace sin.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I'm talking about that. I could say something. I think every day it's a decision to follow Christ. Every day. I'm not one of the people who subscribe to once saved, always saved.
Yeah, right.
I think that we can walk away anytime we choose to.
Right.
And when we choose to willingly allow sin into our lives and we start embracing it, I think your salvation is in danger. So, work it out with fear and trembling. This is my own personal thing. Feel free to send in notes to John, and he'll be happy to respond. But don't send them to me. This is where I am.
Right.
Was that a bad thing to say?
Well, to say the ex-wife, I mean, that's brutally honest, because I can't have a marriage tomorrow. Just because I've had a marriage for 30 years, tomorrow I could end that marriage with my actions.
Yeah. I was studying Solomon and David, and they start off with such great stories of man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
Wisest man in the world. And then their endings were a little abysmal, a little not what we had hoped for. And there's several other people, even in the faith-based industry, who started off doing great things for God and then have made poor choices and became the ex-wife. And when you're aware that if David can do that, if Solomon can do that, if some of these, then the reality is, and I know in my heart that I could do that.
Right.
And when you know that, you have to take precautions. You have to set accountability and barriers up and have people help you with that.
So here's the turn that the Hosea story.
Love that. I was just talking about that last night. Yeah.
So Hosea's wife couldn't have left him any more brutally.
I identify more with Hosea's wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he actually goes and bids on her after she has. We had a painting done this year of that moment where Hosea is standing there with his hand in the air, and in Gomer, however you want to say it, Gomer is on her knees being sold as and he's buying her back. That kind of ex-wife and that kind of bride and that kind of bridegroom who will keep bidding on us even after we have Solomon, we have Davided, we have Petered, we have anybody in the Bible that has not lived a perfect life other than the son, and he doesn't give up on that marriage. Marriages aren't always 50-50 either. Like it's not. You don't always just meet in the middle.
No, but divorces are.
Yeah, right. There are times where one or the other partner is the sustaining agent in that relationship for a period, and that Hosea story describes one of those.
Yep.
we aren't allowed to ask any questions, but Marshall Younger is actually sitting right here
I
in
know.
headphones. So anybody who had a question for Marshall, Torry's writing partner, now would be a great time to call in. Oh, it's a podcast. It won't work. You're off the hook.
Well, what, do you have any questions or?
For Marshall?
Yeah.
No, I won't do that to him. Yeah, Marshall, what's it like to work with Torry Martin? Yeah.
Well, tell me what this is, the intersection of faith and culture. What is the goal?
This No Shame podcast we started this year interviewing people who are in the sports world or in television or in music or in film, because all these are such public things, cultural things. And really, Keith and some of my guys have just been bringing in people who also have faith, and we've been seeing how do the two intersect. So at ICVM, obviously, we've met a whole host of people where the faith is sort of high on the shirt
high.
sleeve,
Mm-hmm.
but there's some fascinating stories. We just right before this interviewed Gary Chapman.
Mm-hmm.
You know Gary, I'm sure.
Yes, I do.
A musician who I've been listening to since he was pre-Amy Grant.
Wow.
I mean, I remember Gary before that, before
Wow.
my father's eyes, and he's had a life like you're talking about, a little bit like Gomer, right? And he would be the first to tell you it's come up and gone down, and and I got a chance just now to talk to him, and it didn't feel formulaic at all. What a rich man, and I just felt so privileged just to hear his thoughts this morning on music and on worship. So that's the idea of the No Shame podcast. Let's just talk to people who have been part of the culture, who are willing to share what their faith is all about. So,
Well, I think one of the things for Marshall and I, when it comes to writing, because we write a lot, is we want to take the culture a little bit deeper in the faith. Most Christian movies stop at the salvation moment.
right?
That's and if Christian movies are for a Christian audience, I would already assume that they've got that moment taken care of. But for me, after expressing the ups and downs of Gary Chapman's life, the ups and downs of my life, I want to do films that take Christians just a step deeper in their faith after making that decision. Because I think for me, the hardest thing is being in the world and not of the world. And if somebody can figure that out and tell me the recipe, I would really like it. But in the meantime, the most we can expect our audience to do, really, that's the thing I hate about this stuff. Always the salvation moment is I don't know how many people are actually going to do that in the theater.
Right.
When for me, it was a series of minor adjustments in my thinking.
Yes.
One little step at a time until finally they all tumbled into place, Finally it spelled out bingo. And I think, honestly, the most you can expect your audience to do is to make a minor adjustment in their thinking. Just start thinking about God. Think about trusting. Think about forgiveness. Do you need to forgive someone? Just think and discuss. That's what I would rather they do than get preached at.
As you were speaking, the analogy, I like to eat every day. Every single day. We just had a nice lunch here. They serve, every day I like lunch. And I don't really need Christian lunch, but I would appreciate no poison in my lunch.
Yeah.
If I'm going to eat this food, I would like it to actually make me healthier, not sicker.
Right.
I like to watch some sort of media every single day, but I don't need the same spice, the same seasonings, the same dish. Why don't we just make good food, great food, all different kinds of food, and take out the poison? Isn't that enough in some ways for Christian artists to create great comedy, great drama, great action adventure, great mystery, maybe great horror if you want, and take the poison out? Mm-hmm. Is that a fair assessment in your view?
I think that's a very fair assessment.
And it doesn't have to be one. It's not like we're going to make one big meal, and after you've had that meal, you're done.
Your whole life is different. You never need to eat again.
Today, I'd like to see a Torry Martin movie. Tomorrow, I'd like to see a Marshall Younger and Torry Martin movie. The next day, just Marshall, no Torry.
What? Blasphemy.
I want to make movies this year, too, my friend. I want to do comedies. I want to do historical drama. I want to do animations. It's hard to get these movies made when we're trying to find partners. But whatever we do, I just want there to be no poison, some really great cooking. Like, a great chef doesn't have to put a Bible verse in my food. He honors God by being a great chef and serving a great meal I kind of want sometimes our media to just to honor God because it's really good.
Yeah. And know that our audience is old enough to hold silverware and feed themselves. We don't have to spoon every
Yes.
emotion into them and make sure they chew
Cry
it
on
properly.
this moment
Right.
and cheer. Oh.
What would you say? I'm just curious, is because I know I have a life theme that runs through almost everything I write. It shows up in everything I write, and it's usually about how God can use anybody, or you're unique, and God can still use you, or your past doesn't matter. God can still use you. Do you have a life theme that finds itself woven? Like, for the first thing that attracted me to you when I had to meet you was after seeing the Frontier Boys at the Sony Faith and Film Breakfast. After seeing the quality of that film, I practically stalked you.
It's awesome.
You know?
Remember that. Yeah, I do. To reveal the beauty of Christ to the world through excellent media. That's what I always put in my head. Have I revealed the beauty? I'm more about the beauty than every other apologetic.
That's your theme? Your
That's
life
my
theme?
more mission statement, I
Okay.
guess. I don't have a life theme written down.
Is there some certain truth that God has showed you that works its way into everything somehow?
I would say Philippians 4, whatever is good and beautiful and true and trustworthy, think on these things. I know that's a little shallow, but if I hear Elton John play a song, I worship because he's so good at playing that song. I just talked about a chef who makes a great meal. Whatever is good. It didn't just say whatever was good in church. You know, whatever was good if there was a sermon or an altar call. And I'm for all those things. I mean, I'm not apologetic, but whatever is good, true, beautiful, trustworthy, noteworthy, think on these things. I love how Paul says that to the Philippians. I love
So you
that.
think on an Elton John song?
I think if I hear Elton John play one chord, bump, and it's Benny and the Jets' first chord, I'm done. That chord works for me. Am I talking about Elton John's philosophy, about his lifestyle? No, I'm talking about his music. And Mozart could be the same thing. U2 could be the same. Whatever. Whenever I heard Gary Chapman play the guitar this morning. He was singing hymns and we were worshiping, but the excellence of his playing was a big thing for me that I'm just staring at his chord inversions, and he's so excellent at what he does. So I'm into that a little bit. And I would aspire to that if we're doing a cartoon, if we're doing a drama, if we're doing a comedy. And I really want to do comedy.
Well, Marshall and I would really love to help with that. As writers and as an actor, dancer, mime artist, whatever you need.
I love it as a dancer because funny dance has never not worked. Would you agree?
I don't know. I don't dance funny. I dance really good.
You lay it down. Did you see Sing? The
No.
cartoon movie
No,
Sing?
uh-uh.
They dance a lot in that cartoon. And I was in Romania casting for our last film, which was Tortured for Christ. And in Romania, a lot of the actors do voice replacement work, so a lot of them were in Sing. So I went to the movie in Romanian. So I didn't understand a word of it, but the funny dancing was all I needed to love the movie. And it's just cartoon dancing.
Yeah.
It sort of made a little adage in my brain. Whenever you're stuck, just dance, and it'll help your scene. So be thinking about that. Let's do some choreography together.
Very good. Do you have any particular approach to projects that you decide to take on, or are most of your projects developed from the ground up in your production studio?
We don't get to develop them hardly ever from the ground up. I wish we could. But we really are been a company for hire. So I just have been thankful God has brought us work to do. We've got 15 employees. They want a paycheck every week, and we produce and we work and we try to please clients. And God's brought us some great projects. But if I had my way, I've got a list of projects here that this is my deepest desire. What God's put
Sheeps
me in.
one. We talked about that last year.
The
That's a
Sheeps
really good idea.
came to life last night for the first time on the screen in the popcorn, and they started dancing and singing, and so we're hoping that we can keep them going. I love that they move now. Sheeps is an animated series that Torry Martin. We're with Torry Martin, by the way, on the No Shame podcast. Torry Martin is an author and an actor and an instigator and a thought leader. And in my life, Torry has been not a matchbreaker, but you've been a matchmaker. Torry has been so generous to introduce me to people along the way, including Luke Conrad, who is an animator who I hope to work with on the Sheeps. But that's the kind of person Torry Martin is. You will see him in a lot of movies, and he's recognizable for his, what would you call it, like godlike shock of red hair. He's like a red-haired Thor.
That's funny.
Kind of.
I'm going to go back to that about investing in the lives of others and networking for others. That is probably one of my biggest passions, to do that because I still can't believe the people who invested in me, including Marshall when I was living in that remote cabin in Alaska. So many people in the Christian community, I couldn't believe that they were writing me a letter or encouraging me, and I still can't believe I'm here. So I feel an obligation to do the same for others, to return the favor, to pass it forward for the people who did that for me. And it is so rewarding because not all the time do you feel like God is working in your life, He's using you. And sometimes it feels like He's a little distant. But when He whispers something and you met somebody else who's got this great project, and then you meet somebody else who is looking for a great project, and you of course want your project to be the one, but you know in your spirit that this other one is the one. When you connect them together and it happens, that's when it's like you are still using me. It's just not about me. It's not about me. You're using me for your kingdom. And so that's the reward when it feels like there's a dry spot in your own. Then be the water can in somebody else's life.
I always believe something about podcasts. We have no idea where they're going to end up. Somebody driving around Alaska some night comes on No Shame, sees the name Torry Martin, starts listening to this podcast 6 months from now, and they're feeling dry, and they hear you say that, and they think, I might not be feeling the water cannon of holiness flowing from heaven to me right now, but can I encourage somebody else? Can I introduce person A to person B because those two might benefit from that? Torry does that and has done that for me and probably for you. And I just hope somebody hears those words that you just said and knows that that was just for them, specifically for them. And that actually, in some strange way, we're not God, this is just a radio product, but it is a word from God to somebody. Don't make it about you. Introduce somebody. Encourage somebody. If you get to see any of Torry's movies...
and you should.
You should see them.
And they're Marshall Younger and Torry Martin movies. We are screenwriting partners.
How do we find you? How do we follow you? Where are you at?
Well, of course, all the social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Torry Martin.
Torry, Martin like the guitar.
Martin, and torrymartin.com.
Look him up. You're an absolute unique gift to this community,
Well,
and I
thanks.
thank you for who you are and what you've meant to us. And look him up. You will not be disappointed. And Marshall, thank you for dominating the conversation this afternoon.
He is the Torry
Appreciate you
whisperer.
having me.
It's like, because I've got chronic ADHD, he is the person that had this gone awry in any way, he would have brought me back on course.
I almost stepped in a couple times.
I know, I tried.
This is the No Shame Podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm John Groders, and see you next time.
Got no shame.